Good afternoon, students. I am Suveda Kakhde. In this class, I am going to continue with yesterday's topic. Yesterday, what we learnt? Pre-independence, Indian English poetry, introduction about it, and then poets. Among poets, I had dealt with Henry Derozio, who was the first Indian English poet. Continuing to the topic, next we have the Dutt family album. Here. The Dutt family album. The only instance of the family anthology in Indian English poetry. It is a collection of 187 poems by three Dutt brothers, namely Govind Chandra, Har Chandra and Grish Chandra, and their cousin Romesh Chandra. So these four Dutt brothers had written poems, and those poems are collected. They are totally 187 poems, and the title is given to that anthology called the Dutt family album. So here about Govind Chandra. He had visited England with his family, and the major subjects of his poems are Christian sentiment, nature and Indian history and legend, and like poets of British romantics. So his famous poem is A Farewell to Romance. Because again the Dutt family, the Dutt brothers had followed the romantic quality of British poets, as yesterday we had discussed that we have Wordsworth, then Keats, Shelley and Byron, and those poets had depicted romantic quality in their poetry. And Indian poets, especially pre-independence Indian poets, influenced by those writers, and they had also depicted the same romantic element in the poetry. And here Govind Chandra, in his poem A Farewell to Romance, he had romantic quality. The next Dutt brother is Grish Chandra Dutt, and his famous poem is Like a Great Temple, and that is a sonnet. Here he had again followed Wordsworth's romantic quality. Then we have Romesh Chandra Dutt. He had depicted about Rajput prince in his poetry, that is nothing but a North European bird and the chief of Pokurna. Next we have Har Chandra Dutt. He had written sonnets, and his famous sonnet is India. Next we have different poet named Ram Sharma. And his works include Willow Drops, which was published in the year 1873 and 74. Next, The Last Day, a poem published in 1886. Next, Shivaratri, Bhagavad Gita and miscellaneous poems published in the year 1903. Ram Sharma wrote occasional verse, and especially he had written ode, and the title of that ode is Ode in commemoration of the visit of Prince Albert to India in 1873. He had also written satires, and the title of that satire is Lines Addressed to James Scribblers. His lyrics dealt with various themes and mystical verse. Next we have the famous pre-independent Indian English poet. She is nothing but Toru Dutt. She was the third and youngest child of Chandra Dutt. Her name is Toru Lata. She learnt English at a very early age, and reading and music were her chief hobbies. She had visited various foreign countries. She had been to Europe, she had been to France, she stayed in England for 3 years, and for that reason she had command over English language. When she returned to India, till then she had written various poems. The main tragedy of her life is she died just when her talent was maturing with her discovery of her roots. She has written 2 famous poetic collections named A Shelf Gleaned in French Fields, published in 1876, which consists 165 lyrics about French, and she had translated those French poems in English. It was her translation. And the next poetic collection is Ancient Ballads and Legends of Hindustan, published in 1882. It published posthumously. And this poetic collection shows Keats' quality, John Keats' quality. She had written various ballads. Among these ballads, 2 are very famous because she had dealt with Indian womanhood as Sita and Savitri, the legends of youngsters like Dhruva, Bhutto, Sindhu and Prahlad. Then the goddesses as Uma and Lakshman, King Bharata. Toru Dutt is the first Indian English poet to make an extensive use of Indian myth and legend in her poetry. Her best known single piece means poem is titled as Our Casuarina Tree. Her best work has deep emotion and an acute awareness of the values of Indian life. Now we have next poet named Romesh Chandra Dutt, a cousin of Toru Dutt. He was an Indian civil service official who retired voluntarily at the age of 49 in order to devote himself to creative writing. He wrote in both languages, Bengali and English. I'm sorry. His poetic collections are, here it is, Lays of Ancient India, which is published in the year 1894. It is a collection of workmen like verse translations from Sanskrit and Prakrit classics including the Rig Veda and Upanishads, Kalidasa and Bharvi, and Buddhist texts like the Dhammapada. The translations of the Mahabharata in 1895, and he also translated the Ramayana in 1899. His main aim was to produce the condensed versions of these two great Indian epics. Condensed version means he had reduced the original size of Mahabharata and Ramayana. So, here it is given. He reduced the 48,000 lines of the Ramayana and 2 lakh of the Mahabharata to 4,000 each, and copying the model of the Western epic. So he had translated the Ramayana and Mahabharata, and especially he reduced the original lines into 4,000 lines. Now next we have Manmohan Ghose as another poet. His poetic career is a classic example. He received his education from England. He returned to India. He wrote various poems which deals with Indian classic theme. He became a professor of English in government college in Bengal. He published his poetic collection called Priyamvara. His next poetic collection titled Love Songs and Elegies, which is published in the year 1898. It is a celebration of nature. His next poetic collection, Songs of Love and Death, published in the year 1926. It was published posthumously. His famous lyric is titled as London. His another poetic collection is titled as Orphic Mysteries, and his last poetic collection titled as Immortal Eve. It is the songs of the trump and mystery of beauty. He also had written verse drama, means dramas in poetic style. And the title of that is Nala and Damayanti. It is a historical Indian mythological story about a great Indian king, mythological king as Nal, and his wife Damayanti. Next we have great writer as Aurobindo Ghose. He is also called as Shri Aurobindo. He is a younger brother of Manmohan Ghose. Shri Aurobindo's long poetic career, spanning 60 years, yielded an impressive volume of verse of several kinds: lyrical, narrative, philosophical, and epic. So he had written lyrical poems, narrative poems, philosophical poems, and epics. So you know the meaning of what is the lyrical poem, what is a narrative poem, what is a philosophical poem, and what is epic poem. Epic means you know that it is a long narrated poem. Let's look into his poetic collections. The first, titled as The Short Poems, published in 1892-1900. It was dealt with a romantic twilight, themes of love, sorrow, death, and liberty in a typical romantic style. He also had included various Greek names in his poem. So here they are depicted about names of those poems as here: invitation, revelation. Then when he published again a short poem in the year 1930 to 1950, he had depicted about the reflective and symbolic verse and the poems as The Rakshasas, The Meditations of Mandavya, his next poetic collection is Collected Poems. It contains some of his best known mystical lyrics like The Bird of Fire, which is published in 1933, Thought the Rose of Gold, published in 1934. He had written longer poems and he is famous three complete narratives are titled as, the one is Urvashi, second one is Love and Death, and third one is Baji Prabhu. These deals with Indian background like the Rishis, the tale of Nala, etc. This Urvashi, a long narrative poem. It is a poem of about 1500 lines written in blank verse, and the story is a retelling of the ancient Indian legend of King Pururvasu and his love for Urvashi. It is an epic where he also included epic similes, and we have studied epic similes in Milton's diction. In his next long narrative poem titled Love and Death, it is here love is a central theme, and this poem is about 1100 lines of blank verse based on an Indian Hindu legend. It is a story of Greek legend, a story of Ruru, son of Rishi Bhrigu, and his beloved Priyamvada, the daughter of Menaka. What is the story is, Priyamvada dies of snake bite and is carried to the world of death, and Ruru brings her back, as the story of Savitri. Like we know the story of Indian great legend Savitri. Her husband died and she brought back the life of her husband by following god Yama. So in the same way here, it is a story where Ruru brings Priyamvada back after the death. His third long poem titled Baji Prabhu, it is the most successful narration of military heroism. It is a historical incident of the heroic self-sacrifice of Baji Prabhu Deshpande, who, to cover Shivaji's retreat, held a pass of Rangana for 2 hours with a small company of men against 12,000 Mughals. So this story is the actual story which had already happened in history of Shivaji Maharaj. Now, the most famous poem of Shri Aurobindo is Savitri. It is epic of 23,813 lines poem written in 12 books and 49 cantos. A part of the poem remained incomplete at the time of his death. So this is the fragment piece of Shri Aurobindo. Still it is very famous because it is written in 23,813 lines. Savitri is a retelling of the well-known legend of Prince Satyavan and Savitri, his devoted wife, who rescues him from death, and it is narrated in about 700 lines in Mahabharata, and is a story of pure love conquering death. So here in this poem, Shri Aurobindo makes some changes in his narration from 700 lines to 23,813 lines. He has used symbols in the poems, all the epic style in his poem Savitri. The subtitle of this Savitri poem is a legend and a symbol, because Savitri is the divine word, daughter of the sun, goddesses of the supreme truth, who comes down and is born to save. So till here I had dealt with some of Indian, pre-independence Indian English poets. In the next class again I will continue with other poets of pre-independence Indian English poetry. So thank you for watching this video. In the next class again I will continue. So do watch the next video.